So everybody is calling the PS5 generation a generation of remakes and remasters. And that's not fully incorrect, to be fair, that we have been getting a ton of games from PlayStation that have been remasters, whether it's The Last of Us Part 1 and 2 getting a remaster, whether it's Horizon Zero Dawn now getting one, and the rumored Days Gone apparently also getting one. It feels like we're constantly getting these remakes and remasters. And for a lot of people, well, I've enjoyed having these remasters, but I'd be lying in saying there's not other games in maybe PlayStation's catalog that they could really look at remastering that would make a lot of people probably a lot happier. Games that feel like they actually probably need a remaster more than some of these games that they have been doing. And so I wanted to make a list of PlayStation properties that I feel like would be great to actually have be remastered, have these games get a fresh coat of paint, and things that I think that the PlayStation community would actually really embrace, and games that would actually pad out and beef out the PlayStation 5's library. So with that all out of the way, let's dive into some of the games that I think we actually need to have remastered for the PS5 versus some games that maybe we didn't need that have been released. So first off, the Infamous collection, specifically Infamous 1 and 2. Infamous was way ahead of its time. It was a phenomenal game that you could play back on the PS3 era, and it was a superhero game in a time when superheroes were not as big as they are today. And this was a pretty grounded story with great characters like Cole McGrath and his journey through getting superpowers and what that was like, and eventually facing different foes and trying to save the world multiple times. And these games were really, really great. That they were made by Sucker Punch, and there are a ton of fans of these games, but they've been kind of dropped and left. That of course we know that Sucker Punch is now focused on the Ghost games, and so it seems like Infamous is kind of dead and gone. But I think especially with the resurgence of superheroes in media, I think these games would be really well received. They are kind of clunky to go back to, but there's lots of great ideas, and for them to actually remake these things from the ground up, I think would do them wonders. And I think they would actually be really popular on the PS5 if they were to go this route. I know that there's a ton of fans of these games, and I think that you would bring in a whole bunch of new fans for these two Infamous games. And so I would love to see these get remade. Will it happen? Probably not. But I know that so many of us would love to see these things get remade. Another series of games I think need a remake, and Astrobot really highlighted this for me, being like, oh yeah, I remember this. This was a fun game, especially because the PS5 and even the PS4 has been labeled as essentially PlayStation makes a lot of very similar games when it comes to their first parties. It's usually very realistic story-based games. That something like an Astrobot was a breath of fresh air to add some variety into the exclusive lineup, and I think a remaster of this trilogy would do the same. And that's the Ape Escape Trilogy. That these games are actually really great platformers where you're kind of running around and hunting down these different monkeys. Of course, Astrobot kind of did it in their own way, where they had an entire level where you essentially played Ape Escape, and it was so much fun. And I remember how much fun I had when I was a kid playing the PS2, playing Ape Escape 2 and 3. That those were the ones that I am particularly played, and they were great games. And I think that there actually is a market for games like that, especially when you think about PlayStation competing with something like Nintendo, that to have more games of this variety would help them to be able to have a competitor and help provide people with more variety in some of the exclusive that they have. And I know that a ton of people have fond memories of the Ape Escape franchise. That it's actually a really great franchise. These games are a ton of fun, and it's crazy to me that they've done nothing with it essentially since the PS2 era. Like, that's bananas, no pun intended, to me. And so I would love to see them remake these games that I think they're due, and I think Astrobot showed that there's a hunger for these games to be re-released into the world. Another one that maybe people don't feel like needs a remake, but I really do think that they do when you go back and play them, is the Uncharted Trilogy. That of course Uncharted 4 is great. It's already kind of got a semi-remaster on the PS5. There's no need to remaster that. But the first three games really could use an overhaul. I know that Naughty Dog actually, with their remasters, have been using those as ways to train new employees as to how to animate and make their systems for them to work on the 2 new projects they're doing, which is the new IP and The Last of Us Part 3. And I think because they've done Part 1 and 2, they're kind of out of remasters to train employees on. I think that if they went back and actually redid the Uncharted games, that would be great, especially that first one. If you go back and try to play it, like, there's great moments, but it is very clunky. You can tell that it's the first time they're really making a game like this, that you can kind of feel it. And then with 2 and 3, they're a bit better. The systems are better, but they really could use an overhaul from that PS3 era. And I think it's something people would look back on. And if they were to release like an Uncharted, I don't know, bundle of all 5 of the Uncharted games together, fully remastered, I think people would really embrace it. And I especially think that that first game really could use some love and some touch up. But I think that they could do that for all 3, and it would actually be really well received in a way that maybe The Last of Us Part 2 wasn't, because it felt like, does this really need a remake? And so if they wanted to train new employees in doing that, I would love to see an Uncharted Trilogy remaster, and I think a bunch of people would dive into this franchise for the first time if you were to do that. And so Naughty Dog, what are you doing? Give us Uncharted remastered. Let's go. Another game series that I think could really use some love, and again, to add that variety into the PlayStation library again, is I think it's the Sly Cooper franchise. This is a franchise that I've never really dove into, because when I was younger, I was a GameCube guy. I had the GameCube, and then I had the Wii, and eventually I got a PS3 and a PS4, and so I kind of missed the Sly Cooper era, where I was never fully able to dive into it. I know they released some games on the PS4 and PS3, but it's kind of been dead since. And so I think it would be a franchise that people would love to see a remaster of maybe the first game or the second game or the third game, for them to do another trilogy where they kind of remake these things and give you more platformers and these type of games on PlayStation. I think there is, again, a market for PlayStation having a variety of certain types of exclusives that aren't just these story-based, super realistic kind of exclusives. And I think to dive into that old library and to bring some of them up and see if there's still interest in these games, it would be a low cost and a low risk. You know that you would bring fans back who would love to play these. And so I think having a Sly Cooper remake remaster would be incredible. And along those lines, and back into Naughty Dog, and this is the main thing I see people asking for when they announced the Part 1 remake and then the Part 2 remaster, was actually getting a Jak and Daxter trilogy remake. Again, it would add variety, but I think that these games are hidden treasures that people do not know about. Most people around today don't even really, they think of Crash Bandicoot when they think of Naughty Dog before Uncharted and The Last of Us, but people forget about Jak and Daxter, and these were incredible games. And even the PSP, just the Daxter spinoff, was also a great game. That I think that this series has incredible characters and could, again, add that variety into PlayStation's library, that there's a deep hunger for people to actually see these games get remade. And I think the problem with it is, it looks like Naughty Dog is going to continue in the more realistic story-based kind of games, and I know that they like to use these remasters to help train new employees, and so I don't know if that would work with their model, because of course Jak and Daxter is not a hyper-realistic kind of game, but I would love to see them take a swing at this, that I think people would really embrace it and love it, and it would do some service to some fans who have had some of these franchises just die off and would love to just have something from them. And so I would love to see a Jak and Daxter remake as well. And then lastly, and this is because it's fresh in my brain, that I had played the God of War 2018 and Ragnarok recently and dove into those and went, wow, these games are so incredible and so good. And for a long time, I held off on the God of War series because by the time that I got to the age of wanting to play those, they were games where I looked at and were like, I don't really have an interest. Like, it looks like a button masher, and it looks like it's in a weird perspective for that original trilogy. And so I avoided it, but then dove in with the 2018 and Ragnarok and absolutely fell in love with this franchise. And what I would personally love is to see them remake that God of War trilogy. That I think there's a deep hunger for that a lot of people would love to go back and dive into Kratos' story from the beginning. And I think a lot of people were like me, where they dove into God of War with that 2018 game, and they don't really know the lore behind what's happened or seen Kratos' journey. And I think it would be so cool for them to remake those games and give people that experience. I think there's actually really is a hunger and a market for that. I could actually see PlayStation pursuing something like that, because I think it would sell really well, and you would give favor to those old fans of that trilogy, but then all these new fans that you've already acquired could hop in and experience that story in the Greek mythology for the first time. And so I think it would be incredibly well received, and it's something that I think is really overdue, that I wouldn't be surprised if we see them remake these games in the near future. Maybe when I think they're making a God of War TV show, movie. I can't remember whether it's a TV show or movie, but maybe when that comes out, maybe they start remaking these games and releasing them. But I would love to dive into that original trilogy with a new coat of paint, with better mechanics, with all of the quality of life improvements that come from a PS5 poured into them. I would love that, and I know that many other people would as well. And so with that being said, those are the games that I really feel like PlayStation should and could remaster or remake, specifically remake from the ground up, that I think all these games could use a real true remake. And I think that PlayStation fans would lose their marbles if they actually announce these, and people would be incredibly excited. And to be honest, we need these remakes way more than we need a Horizon Zero Dawn. I'm excited to dive into Horizon Zero Dawn. As someone who hasn't played it yet, I am excited to dive into that with the remake, and I'll be giving you guys a review for that. But I wish that we would get games like these remade. And I think the reason why we don't see it is because it's not a continuing franchise, and so there's not more money to be made. But I really think that there are a lot of people who would love to see these get remade, and people who you would bring in who would become new fans of these franchises. Because here's the thing, PlayStation has so many mascots and so many franchises that are beloved that they just drop. That they're not like Nintendo, where they keep it going, and you keep getting Mario games, and you keep getting Metroid games, and you keep getting Zelda games, and they keep their franchises alive. That they make these franchises, they create fan bases, and then they just let them die. And I would love to see some life come back to these beloved franchises. But let me know in the comment section down below what you think. What are some of the games that I maybe missed that you would love to see remakes of? Are any of the ones that I named things that you would want PlayStation to actually pursue? Let me know in the comment section down below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that junk, and I will see you guys in the next one.